Welcome to today's episode and the topic of structure and immune function of the lymphatic system. If you would like to listen to this episode on another platform, please follow the link in the description. We are going to look at questions like, what is the lymphatic system? How does it work? And what is it doing for us? And of course, much more. For the conversation, I invited Dr. Tracey Clark. She works in the field of integrative medicine since 2007, and she can tell us all about these topics. If you would like to know more about her, I also put all her links in the description, so feel free to look that up. To make it easier for you to find the topics you're interested in, I, of course, put down timestamps, so feel free to jump around. Then I can just say thank you for your time and thank you that you take it out of your workday today to let us know more about this topic. Thank you and a warm welcome, Tracey.
Thank you so much, Dagmar. It's a pleasure to be here and to share this topic that is one that I think is so important for us in order to support our health on an ongoing basis, and one that I'm always happy to talk about.
Yes, and I already had the pleasure of having a workshop with you about exactly that topic. So that's why I thought it's great to bring you in. Before we start into the topic, you can also already say something about yourself and your background a little bit.
Oh, certainly. So I am based in Canada. I am a advanced senior body talk instructor and advanced body talk practitioner, which just means that as well as having a body talk practice with clients worldwide, I also teach around the world the full curriculum of the body talk system. But I came into this work with a little bit of a varied background. I also am a manual osteopath, and I have a doctorate and PhD in integrative medicine. So although I'm based in Canada, I also spent part of my year in Portugal, and very happy to have the opportunity to share this work, both with my clients online and also with my students, both online and in person worldwide.
That is definitely a good thing of this time right now. And for the last few years, I see that we can work online all the time. And if you can have the pleasure to spend a lot of time in Portugal as well, that's like, I'm very positively envy there.
Well, it's definitely a wonderful place, I'm sure, to attract people to come to in-person classes, because there is a lot to enjoy in that country for sure.
Yeah. Absolute. Great. Then let us deep dive into our topic of today, the lymphatic system. Just an overall view. What is it? What do we use it for? Or what is it helping us with? Just let us know something about it.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you've, have the interest in exploring a little bit about the lymphatic system, because it is a system that is integral to our immunity and our overall health and our capacity to maintain health. It is a secondary circulatory system, which essentially just means that it supports circulation by helping to balance water throughout the body, taking excess water away from the area around our cells. But as it does that, it's also taking waste products from our cells. It's taking pathogens, meaning viruses, bacteria, parasites, toxins, anything that shouldn't be circulating in our blood. It even actually supports digestion by carrying away larger fat molecules, larger protein molecules that the venous system is unable to carry. But what's so important about the lymphatic system is that it helps to maintain an environment of purity around our cells. And that's crucial to health. In fact, if your lymphatic system stopped working entirely, you would die within hours, because the ability to maintain a healthy environment for our cells is perhaps one of the most important things for not only health, but survival. So the lymphatic system really is an integral system. It does contain within it our immune cells, or what we call lymphocytes. And this is also where our immune activity oftentimes is beginning. Not only is the lymphatic system pulling these pathogens out of circulation, but also launching attack. So here in these very important structures of the lymphatic system are the capacity to identify when something is detrimental to the system, but also to address it. And so it's a complex system, but it's one that we can support through some fairly simple daily activities and level of awareness, and how that supports lymphatic health.
So it's basically a background helper the majority of people don't even know anything about.
Exactly. And I think that, I would say prior to the last couple of years, a lot of people didn't even really have an understanding of what it is, let alone how important it is. And unfortunately, I think Western medicine, because it is an emergency medicine, which is an excellent at emergency and crisis management, but typically our only awareness of the lymphatic system is when it's sick, when it needs help. And now I love to see that even in social media, I see so much more information about the lymphatic system. And I love to see that, because I think that that is an area where we can all be proactive in our health by understanding a little bit about it and understanding what supports it.
Definitely, I'm with you on that. And I'm always very surprised when I see my own clients and I tell them, oh, lymphatic drainage would come up in a protocol for you right now. And they're like, what? And what am I doing there? And it's like, you're not doing anything. I'm doing that for you, but it's really, really important for your health. And then they get used to it and they look stuff up, and I send them material, and they tell me like, I never thought about that before. So they get more and more awareness now.
Yeah. And, you know, it's something that the founder of the Body Talk system really believed wholeheartedly in. Dr. Valtime was a chiropractor and a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist, and in his practice, he always insisted that when new clients came in, they always started with lymphatic drainage before he did anything else with them, which is why in that system, we see a whole module devoted to teaching students about how to do that and how to introduce that in their practice. Because, you know, when we look at health from even an osteopathic background, and this is a background I come from, so I'm happy to share that understanding, but there's a very important tenet of health in this philosophy, and that is that the movement of fluids is essential to the maintenance of health. And what does that mean? It means that the moment that movement stops, disease begins, and toxicity begins to build in our system. And of course, that leads to inflammation. And we know that inflammation can be an underlying factor to a lot of illnesses or dis-ease in the body. And so when a cell needs to heal, the very first thing that has to happen is that we need to create the environment for which it can receive what it needs. Because if it is surrounded by toxicity, those important cell membranes lock down to prevent those toxins from entering. But at the same time, it prevents nutrition, it prevents oxygen, it prevents hydration from entering into the cell. And we also see a buildup of toxicity internally. And this is how cells begin to mutate. This is how cells begin to die. So that lymphatic system supporting it, helping to create drainage around these, at this tissue level, around the cellular level, is so important. And it's really like the first step toward healing. And that's why we'll see, whether we come at it from an osteopathic perspective or we come at it from a Body Talk perspective, it's a common priority for clients, because we need to set the groundwork. We need to create an environment that's going to be conducive to healing.
Yeah. And it's for me always interesting to see when they experience it, like when they feel like something is moving in my body. It's like, yeah, because it's a liquid in your body. Of course it's moving when we start to work with it. They're like, strange. It's like it's such a new experience to them.
Yes, I think we forget that our body is anywhere from 70 to 90% water, depending on which structure we're addressing. And I think that when we work at this level, we return to our watery nature and our understanding of the importance of movement in our body.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really so important. Also, I really like the sentence, like, when we stop moving, or when that circular system stops moving, diseases start. So that you just keep that in mind, because the first thing you would think of is like, how do I keep that moving? By walking. That would be the easiest thing I would come up with.
Yes, I mean, in terms of supporting our lymphatic system, as I mentioned, it's relatively easy when we're aware of the importance of movement, because, you know, the lymphatic system is a fascinating system in the fact that it is moving essentially upward in the body. It's bringing this fluid that it's filtering and filtering and filtering again back into blood flow. And it does that primarily just under the clavicles, right? So it's moving upward in the body, and it's moving against the force of gravity.
Yeah.
So there are certain aspects in the body that create pressure differentials, like the movement of our 4 diaphragms. And when I say diaphragms, I'm really talking about horizontal structures that work with our breath to create a type of pumping or piston effect in the body. So we have a sling of muscles at the base of our pelvis that we call the pelvic floor. We have our respiratory diaphragm, which is the large parachute-shaped muscle underneath our lungs and over our upper digestive system. We have a group of muscles at the top of the shoulders called the thoracic inlet. And we have a horizontal membrane between the bulk of the brain and what we call the little brain, the cerebellum, right in the cranium. So when we breathe, these four diaphragms move in opposition to create an area of low pressure around our heart. And that's what draws fluid back toward the heart. So this is one mechanism of movement, which is the diaphragm. So if we bring in breathing practice, for example, things like yoga or Pilates or meditation or anything where we just focus on breathing and optimizing breathing, which seems like a really simple thing. But, you know, as a practitioner, excuse me, if you measure breath, you see how compromised many people are in their breathing patterns. The other thing that helps to move lymph fluid is what we call the skeletal muscle pump. And the skeletal muscle pump is the movement, literally, of our skeletal muscles. So anytime we are in movement, whether it's walking, swimming, dancing, stretching, we are contracting and releasing our muscles. And every contraction and release of a muscle squeezes the local lymph vessels, and that also supports the movement of lymph. So movement is key. Breathing exercises, very, very supportive to the lymphatic system. And, you know, our lifestyle now tends to be much more sedentary in the fact that we do tend to sit for long periods of time, whether it's in front of the computer, whether it's in front of the television, whether it's in a car or on a plane. There's a lot more sitting than there used to be. And so that's something that I always remind clients of as well, is that if we do have a lifestyle that tends to keep us in a sedentary position for a long time, use our technology like our smartphone to remind us on the hour. Perhaps just get up and have a glass of water, just walk around the office a little bit, just do a little stretch, just let that body move because it's designed to be in motion.
Yeah. Absolutely right. And I really like that if you have just like these small helpers of reminding you, whatever you used to do that, but that you're reminding yourself throughout the day that you can actually do these tiny little things. And we're drinking way too little, like it's most of the time we drink coffee or we drink sodas or something. So not really water that would be helpful for the body and also for the lymphatic system. So that we remind ourselves, do something healthy for you once in a while during the day.
It's always interesting to me how hard that seems to be for people to just drink water. I'm always drinking
Me too.
To be honest, I crave it. But the reality is that for most of our clients, or most of my clients anyway, that always seems to be a difficult thing. And I think it's because hydration to them may seem like drinking extra coffee or having extra juice or soda or a glass of wine, right? These are liquids, but really they are dehydrating factors for us in many, many ways. And so, yes, I can't say enough about the importance of drinking water on a regular basis, starting our day with it, reminding ourselves throughout the day to hydrate. Yeah.
Very important. It's like I moved from water to ginger tea because of my condition right now, but also a very helpful thing to do that and just cleanse yourself out. And I love that if you have herbs like who just everything that feels like heat in your body is like, okay, I'm not moving, but I feel that my body is moving right now because of the heat.
Definitely. Definitely.
Very helpful. And what is something, if you think about your clients, for example, what is like typical stereotypes maybe about lymphatic system, or what they don't know, like what they most of the time don't think about when they come to you, and also symptoms that you see?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I work in a field where nothing's typical.
Okay, I'm giving you that, yes. Yes.
But I can definitely give you symptoms that I see, areas where people are perhaps not as educated about their lymphatic system. And first of all, I think what is very common and what I work hard to provide for my clients is that the term lymphatic drainage sounds like something uncomfortable and foreign. And I always spend a little extra time to help people understand what it is that we do in our practice. And I've trained in actually 4 different lymphatic drainage techniques.
Yeah.
There are many that I use because I am an osteopath. I have a variety of tools in which I can support the lymphatic system. One that I tend to use perhaps the most, just simply because it seems to be the most effective for a lot of people, is one that focuses on the movement of interstitial fluid, which is the fluid around our cells, and helps to release congestion, rather that simply because we've built up fluid in the area, or we have adhesions in our tissues, so the tissues are not allowing easier circulation. Perhaps we've had inflammation in our body, which also causes adhesion and restriction. And what I love about that technique is that it provides, or it creates, wave-like patterns in the body to essentially set up that pressure differential I talked about earlier. So we use our hands in sweeping motions to create low pressure behind our hands, so that when we release that, it draws fluid back along that pathway and allows the local lymph vessels to absorb it. Now, as a result, that's a very relaxing treatment. It's one that appeals to our nervous system because we are reestablishing and supporting or augmenting a natural contraction, expansion motion that is reflexive in our body. So we're supporting a natural movement and helping to reestablish that movement again for the client. So the nervous system loves it. It's very, very relaxing. It brings a lot of ease into the system, as well as obviously supporting this movement of fluid. So I let them know how relaxing, how comfortable this session is, because the name itself doesn't always allude to that. It sounds, again, a little bit invasive just by the nature of the name of the work that we're doing. In terms of typical symptoms, I would say that a lot of times when we have congestion in this system, we will have decreased energy, obviously compromised immunity. So perhaps a tendency toward colds and flus and inflammation in our system. We can see painful joints, because that's one area where we can see congestion of lymph when the system is struggling a little. And because those lymph nodes that are the filters of the lymphatic system contain within them immune cells, when that lymph builds up, those immune cells are fighting hard to stay ahead of the toxicity. So we get ongoing inflammation as a result of those lymphocytes trying to kill off the toxins and pathogens that have accumulated. Now, as a result, that becomes like a chronic inflammatory pattern, and we can get aches and pains, etc. I always find that this, when we're working with the lymphatic system, oftentimes clients feel like a boost of energy as a result. They may notice drainage in their body, rather that sinus drainage, rather it's a day or two of increased urine output, volume, not frequency, release of congestion around the abdominal organs usually leads to greater bowel regulation, improved sleep, improved digestion. So a lot of times those are the symptoms that they come in with, but also the symptoms that they notice improvement in. And I always feel that as a lovely boost of energy, because if we can support efficiency in the body, in one of the most important systems for health, then we have an extra resource of energy to use elsewhere. If the body's just trying its best and working very hard to maintain purity in the internal environment, then the energy that we have will go there first. And as a result, we can feel fatigued, we can feel run down. And I think that that's a wonderful benefit that comes from working in this way, is feeling greater vitality, greater clarity, less pain, greater efficiency in our immune system.
And that's a really good thing. If like clients already feel that after like 24 hours or 48 hours, we're having like, wow, so much is moving, so much is changing right now. One of the things that my clients always say is like, my clothes fit better now. It's like, because water is just getting out of the body. It's like, yeah, of course, then that happens. It's like, I'm not feeling bloated and stuff like that. And it's like, this is so cool, because then they see there is an added value to that. And then they also look into the lymphatic system and what you can actually do to support your system that you haven't really thought about for maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. So that is super, super helpful. Is there any physical things that you can give tips to how we can support our lymphatic system? Not just by walking, but maybe if you get up and you have a morning routine or anything else.
Well, I think there are many supplementary things that we can do for our lymphatic system. Things like dry brushing, which is something that is a stimulatory technique on the skin that helps to create this sort of sweeping motion that I talked about, and encouraging the movement of lymph upward in the body. Epsom salt baths are nice because they support detoxification in the body, but I always spend time to make sure that my client knows how to do that effectively, meaning that we need to make sure that we put enough Epsom salt that it covers the bottom of the tub. So that's typically the large baking measuring cup, whether you're in metric or you're in imperial. That they stay in the bath long enough that they break a sweat. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. So they may sprinkle salt in the tub like they're seasoning soup. They may sit only, long enough to get wet.
Yeah.
So I give them some instruction. Make sure that you stay there long enough. You break a sweat. You're drinking water, not a glass of wine. And when you come out of the tub, because you've been sweating, it's always nice to have a cool shower. And what we've just done is we've created expansion in the lymph vessels through the heat of the tub. And then we create contraction by the coolness of the shower. And that in itself is a type of motion that supports lymph. So that's very useful. I think that a rebounder or a small trampoline is a wonderful tool for the lymphatic system, because the movement of jumping from one foot to the other foot, not the straight up and down bouncing, but from one foot to the other foot, is very beneficial to the movement of fluid in our body. So I do recommend that for clients. I think that's a wonderful tool of physical fitness, but even promoting health that we could all use. I know that there are many essential oils that are designed to support lymphatic health. There are supplements that can support balance of movement of fluid. But I would say for me, the number one is movement and hydration, because these are the things that people struggle with and yet are very easy to introduce into our life. I know that there are also there's lots of information now online about doing stimulation of the lymph nodes in the clavicular area, in the underarm or axilla, in the groin. These are areas where we have the majority of those lymph nodes located. And so there are lots of little techniques out there now to support an easy stimulation or pumping of those nodes. And I think all of those things are beneficial tools that we can incorporate daily.
Definitely. And we should, not just we should. Really nice. Yeah. And when you build a bridge to your integrative medicine, like where you also use it in integrative medicine, and maybe explain also what is integrative medicine so people understand there are other ways like the Western medicine, and you can use things differently.
Beautiful. Yes. Integrative medicine is really Western and Eastern concepts combined. It is whole body medicine, meaning that it honors the influence of the mind on the body. It is supporting a big picture perspective. So it's also helping to honor the influence of the environment on our health and how we interact with our environment. And it brings in philosophies from Chinese medicine, Vedic philosophy, as well as Western anatomy and physiology and the understanding from a Western perspective. And I feel as a practitioner, it gives me a much greater avenue in which I can support my client where they need support today. And a lot of times that's not just on the physical level.
Yeah.
It's a system of medicine that really honors a certain hierarchy of influence, everything from our perceptions, how we see ourselves and how we see the world, and how that impacts the self and the world that we see, including our beliefs and our expectations, and how conflicts around these things cause stress and tension that can be instantly measured within the physical body. It's a form of medicine that looks at the impact of emotion, right? Emotion itself is energy in motion, energy meant to create motion. But when it gets stuck, that can be a huge factor to the restriction of movement in the body at a physical level. So it allows me to work with that bigger picture perspective and not just be focused on the physical. So I love working in an integrative way because I think that this gives us a greater avenue of approach for each individual client and where they are that day. It's I think, a much more customized form of healthcare, and one that tends to stay away from diagnosis or a one-size-fits-all approach, and brings in the tools that I have when they are going to be effective for the client. Now, the Western approach to lymphatic work is a little different than the integrative approach to lymphatic health. Both, of course, very effective depending on the situation, and tools that I definitely use in my practice depending on who I'm working with and how. So if we're working from a Western perspective, the focus is entirely on the lymph nodes themselves, which are the filters of that system, as well as the lymph pathways. So that involves techniques in which we pump the lymph nodes to create, again, local pressure differential to support the movement of fluid in and out of those nodes. We do sweeping movements, effleurage, or what we call call-up techniques, where we open up the lymph vessels with our hands and the motions that we use, and then we literally help to walk fluid up the vessel pathway. And there's a variety of tools that we can use. We can do deeper lymphatic work or more superficial lymphatic work with these tools. The integrative approach that I use in my practice as well, which is called the Veltheim method of lymphatic drainage, it works not so much with the nodes and vessels, but rather with the tissues. And as I mentioned earlier, helping to create these pressure differentials throughout the body to help the fluid move to the vessels. So it's working more at the cellular or tissue level. And I find this one also a very effective tool. But in integrative medicine, of course, we also understand that there could be factors that are impeding the movement of lymph. It may not actually just be within the nodes and the vessels themselves, but it could be a mind-body connection. It could be an emotional holding somewhere. And it allows us to take that perspective as well. And I find that that is highly effective and also much more, as I mentioned, customized to that client and what might be impacting the capacity of that system to function with greater efficiency.
Yeah. And it's really, for me, it's always impactful when I see that when I work with my clients and the body talk system, and I, for example, do lymphatic drainage and I get to an emotion, and then my clients super get emotional because the emotion gets released and they don't understand. It's like, why am I starting to cry? It's like, because we release grief right now. And this is, of course, something is moving in your body. And for them, it's always like an experience of, whoa, how does that even work? And I'm like, yeah, that's a little bit different, like what we know from Western medicine. It's not just like we're poking you somewhere and then you have a reaction. This is just not how it works.
Well, I love that you bring that up because that's something as well that most people don't have a clear understanding of in terms of the nature of emotion, what it's designed to do. And when we talk about moving emotion in the body, it seems like an intangible thing. But what we don't always realize, or maybe many people don't realize, is that when we experience an emotion, our brain produces a chemical, a neuropeptide. And this is something that circulates through our bloodstream to support or to create movement at the cellular level. As I mentioned, emotion is like a fuel. It's a fuel that drives the core and key motions of our body. It's very important. And it's only when it gets stuck. Now, think of it as a chemical, right? If we build up chemical toxicity in an area, rather it's a hormone or it's a neurotransmitter, or in this case, a neuropeptide, that changes the chemistry of the tissue where it becomes congested. And so that can, in fact, lead to symptom, like any other chemical building up in an area. And a lymphatic session is actually really helpful to mobilize this emotion, to clear that local toxicity. And when I talk about toxins, we always think, or we tend to think about environmental toxins that we bring into our body. We don't think necessarily of, the chemical toxicity that is a result of our own chemistry, like hormones, or as I mentioned, neurotransmitters or emotions that get stuck in an area. So once we set that back in motion, it allows the body to clear what we don't need. But an interesting thing about emotion is, as I mentioned, it's really designed to create movement in us, but it can only do that when it's in motion. So if it gets stuck in our tissues, instead of being productive, it becomes more destructive. And as we start to support the movement of this chemistry, the body can use it in a healthy way if it does, in fact, need that, or it can release it with any other toxin, as the body is designed in its amazing mechanisms of filtration and elimination. But yes, I think that is a really good point that you bring up, that working in this way, and when I talk about restoring motion in the body, we are restoring the movement of emotion once again. And that can be a very beneficial tool. People, I think, are more aware of the pathological expressions of emotion than they are the healthy expressions and what they're doing for us every single day. I mean, right now, as I'm thinking and speaking to you, I'm using worry, because worry is the energy to think clearly and to solve problems. The energy that got me up and got me dressed and got me online with you was anger, because anger is the fuel of motivation and productivity, of organization, of decision-making, of communication. That's what it helps us to do. But oftentimes our relationship with our emotion is only with the negative aspects of it. And that's when it gets stuck, right? When it's not moving well, then it becomes uncomfortable. And this is a great way to support that easy movement of emotion, right? Once again.
Yeah. I really like that. And that you also see like which emotions can I feel, and all of the emotions have like positive and negative sides, and everything is a resource. And the question is always, how do I feel about that? When I always look, I have several clients, they always come in and they say like, I was either they use the wording, and I really don't like that when they say that, I am depressed. It's like, okay, you're already identifying with it, or I was diagnosed as depressed. And I always think like, so what is that word saying? Your body is basically in deep rest. So you're not moving, your emotions can't move, and then you have a build up of that. And that is just like, everything feels heavy in the body. That is your experience then. This is what my clients tell me. And I'm like, so we need to get that into movement. But for them, it's like, I can't get myself, I don't have enough anger to get myself up and move outside. And I'm like, and this is something where lymphatic drainage, or like the movement itself of lymph, is absolutely amazing and easy for them to experience. And then they realize something is better in my life. And this is something where I think like this is such a great technique to use.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. And I think you bring up a really good point about language. When we say I am, whatever we say after that, we've taken ownership of. And a lot of times, as you said, I am depressed, I will help my client to understand that's not who you are. That's just something you're experiencing. I'm experiencing depression. And as you said, depression, in its simplistic terms, is a lack or a depression of function. It's we're not hitting or experiencing our potential. Rather, that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And the first step, again, I agree with you, is about getting things moving. Let's see where we're stuck and how can we support movement? Because once things start moving again, especially these emotions that we're talking about, right, as they get stuck in our system, and the more of it that we build up, the more discomfort we feel. But once we are able to start to put them in motion and use them in a productive, healthy way, then we are building vitality in the system, and we're clearing the things that may have weighed us down, as you mentioned.
And it's for me also so important, like that keeps me motivated to move every single day and go out into the forest and have a walk or anything. And people always say to me, is like, why are you taking so much time out of your day and just go for a walk for an hour or 1.5? And I'm like, I'm taking nothing out of my day. Like this is super important for you and your body to do that. So you're adding something to your day, not like, again, language, taking something out of your day. So everything is like, it's connected, and people need to think, how do I use words? What is my intention by doing something? And do I perceive it as a resource for me or not?
Exactly. Yes, I think perspective is the number one key as it relates to the reality that we experience. Right? What are we expecting of ourselves in the world? Because surprisingly, that's pretty much what we're creating.
Yeah.
And I think the first step of it is helping to shift our language, of starting even just to become aware. I think the observation of a pattern is the point in which we can change it. And a lot of times the observation of a pattern comes from new information,
Yeah.
right? A new perspective that helps us to shift from the track that we've been following to observe that, wow, I see this now. Right? As soon as we observe it, we've stepped out of participation. And I think that's an important place of healing, where we can change how we see self, or how we see that pattern, or how we see what we're meaning in our day. Because how we observe something is what's influencing what we observe.
So how is it your experience with your clients? Do they have an understanding how emotions are connected to the lymphatic system? Or is it like, no?
I would say no. It's an exceptional client that has that awareness,
Okay.
because it's not something that's taught to us,
Yeah.
generally from a Western perspective. I think that Eastern medicine gives us a much better understanding of relationship to emotions. But unless somebody has come from that background, typically, no. Typically, this is an area where I can really help to educate my clients of different ways to think about their health and different ways to understand the impact that they have on their health. And that can be very empowering, because it helps them to understand that they're not at the mercy of their body or their dis-ease, but in fact, they're the masters of their genes, their genetics, their physiology. I help them to understand that every single thought they have has a physiological response. So if we can learn a different perspective, and we can help to shift the mind's relationship, I think that's a very important place to start. And I would say that people typically are not aware of the level of influence that we have constantly on our health. And a lot of times when something is showing up at a physical level, symptomatically, naturally, our focus goes to a physical remedy. And, oftentimes, especially if we're in crisis, that physical remedy is where we need to start, but not always. And I think that's why I love working from an integrative approach, is because we can really come at support of that system or that symptom from a broader perspective, and support not just at a physical level, but perhaps the things that are causing the very symptom that we're observing. So it's much more of a cause and effect approach, as opposed to just a symptomatic approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting, because seeing the connection, like, one of the questions I love to ask my clients is always like, so when do you experience that? Like you feel depressed, or you have grief coming up, and you think like, oh God, everything is heavy. And then they need to analyze, when is the time during the day they experience that. It's like, I never thought about that, but you're right. It's most of the time a specific time. And then I explain to them what the organ clock is, and they're like, now everything makes sense. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that as well, like how organs are also connected to certain emotions, of course, then also get cleaned out through the lymphatic system.
Well, I think in a simple way, when we understand what you're referring to, which we call the Chinese clock, which is observation of different systems being at the height of their function at different times of day. And the Chinese perspective of talking about organs is very different than Western. We're not really talking about the physical organs in the same way as we do with Western medicine, but rather a system that is correlated with an organ.
Yeah.
And when I say a system, it also includes an emotion. It includes themes of thoughts. It includes our senses. It includes various aspects of the physical body, various aspects of movement, our relationship to our environment, right? These systems are comprehensive. But that 24-hour clock is honoring where in each 2-hour window, there's a different system that's dominant, that's at the height of its function. And I think this is a wonderful understanding to have, because we can also align our daily activities to the optimal time to do that. But it also gives us a sense of when we might see certain symptoms coming up at a certain time of the day. It may give us a little bit of insight, not necessarily toward the cause, but the system in which it's showing up, right? So I think that that's a very insightful model, and one that in Chinese medicine has been used for thousands of years to align health, meaning, that they honor the importance of breath and breath practice. And they understand that between 3 and 5 a.m. is when the lung system's at the height of its function. So the optimal time to be doing breath work is actually at 4 a.m. because that's when that energy peaks. And so if you are familiar with meditation practices or breathing exercises, people who are really serious about that oftentimes align that practice to 4 a.m. in the morning. Or we can understand that the stomach system is at the height of its function between 7 and 9 a.m. So this is an optimal time to be ingesting, right? Because that system is active. It's at the height of its function. We can understand that, let's say the small intestine system is at the height of its function between 1 and 3 in the afternoon. And this is when we're doing the majority of our awake digestion, right? When assimilation is happening. So it's a good time to have eaten before, because now the small intestine's really absorbing what we've taken into our body. And I often notice when clients have a real drop at that time, right? They drop into fatigue. It may be because there's a bit of deficiency in the system, and the energy has to go to the intestine, right? It's like everything goes to the intestine for this function, and now we're tired. Right? So there's some interesting observations we can make in terms of aligning things to the clock and even aligning our activities, right? Our most expansive time of the day in terms of vitality is between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. when we're in the height of heart time. So if we were going to do, the most involved intellectual work, if this time we're going to present something, for example, this is good. Or if we wanted to do a little bit more of a intense workout, for example, that's a great time to do it, because the body is at the height of its vitality and its function. So yeah, I think that that's a fascinating concept. I think it's something that we can definitely observe when we're aware of it, the constant cyclical patterns that are happening in our body. And we can honor that by supporting, being asleep in the times where the body is in deep processing between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Knowing how important it is to feed the body at certain times, to move the body at certain times. So I think, yes, it's a very interesting concept, and it's a useful one.
Yeah. And according to what do I ask my clients, or I reflect for myself, I had that funny story where I never thought about the organ clock in that moment. I was like, I'm doing that all the time for my clients, but why didn't I see that for myself? At 11 a.m., I always stopped working and then started cleaning something in the house, like the windows or doing the dishes. And I observed that for 2 weeks, and I was like, what is it? What is it about 11 a.m.? And I was like, I was cleaning the windows at that moment. It's like, oh my God, I'm cleaning my heart. I never thought about that. It's the heart time. What does need to be cleaned out in my heart? And then I stopped doing that because I realized, okay, what am I doing? And then focusing on heart with meditation or anything else, that was like, okay, and that's it. Now I didn't need to stop whatever I was doing at 11 a.m. to do the cleaning stuff. So that was so interesting to me. These small little things you can see and observe in your daily life when you actually have specific times you do things again and again and again.
Absolutely. Yes. And again, you made the observation, right?
Yeah.
The observation is such a key piece of taking the gift from that from the message of that experience. Yes.
Definitely. I also always say, like, every organ, every system is basically a messenger for us. The question is, are we understanding the message?
Yes. And I think what many people don't understand is that there can be no separation between the mind and the body, because the mind is driving our physiology, right? The physical body is a manifestation of the mind. And so I think that's such a key component when it comes to restoration of health. And the understanding that one of the biggest things that impacts the movement, and we're talking about lymphatic system today, is stress.
Yeah.
And in fact, I mean, we could say that at least 90% of dis-ease in the body is caused by or made worse by stress.
Yeah.
Right. And stress begins in the mind. I mean, what is stress? It's an expectation that wasn't met. It's an inability to adapt to challenge. And I love that definition. Chinese medicine describes health as the capacity of an organism to adapt to challenge.
Ooh,
and stress is literally the inability to adapt. And so, you know, when we understand that, I think that is also a very important piece of information for clients, that if we want to support healing, one of the key things that they need to do is to look at where they have stress in their life and how they could mitigate that stress. And it can be a variety of different ways, of course. And oftentimes we need support to do that. But all of these little things that we've talked about today, the understanding of the emotion and what it's designed to help us do, the importance of movement, the importance of breath, the importance of looking at the beliefs perhaps, or the expectations that become conflicted and cause this cascade of stress through the body. I think that's an important way to approach healing, is to really honor the mind-body connection. Because anytime we just work at the physical level, if that symptom is the result of conflict in the mind, or conflict with emotion, or storage of emotion in our body, it's going to come back. Because we can only have so much effect on the physical manifestation if we don't address the cause.
Yeah. Definitely. And this is also a tricky thing, because when I look at my clients, everyone perceives stress differently. Things that people always say, Dagmar, you have such a stressful life. And I'm like, I don't. I'm chilled all the time. I can do whatever I want. Like, how do they perceive my life? But also the other way around, when they tell me something and I'm like, okay, I'm not judging, but where is the stress? But they perceive it as stress. So it already has an effect on their body.
Yes. And I love that you use the word perceive, because it comes back to our perception.
Yeah.
Our reality is a direct response or creation from our perception. So if I meet the day expecting stress, I'm going to find it.
Yeah.
Right? Or if I look at your life and your busyness and I define that in my realm as stress, it looks stressful to me. But as you said, from your perception, it's entirely different, because your relationship to your flow in your life is a totally different one.
Yep.
And therefore, we could look at the same thing and have two very different perceptions of that reality. So
Absolutely.
it does come back to that very important place of how do I see myself? How do I see my world? What am I creating? What reality am I creating through my perceptions and through my expectations? And if we want to change that reality, let's look at that perception.
Yeah, definitely. And in order to do that and also help people, that's a very great bridge. What are you offering also as workshops? Because I attended the lymphatic drainage workshop and I loved it, and my clients also loved it. So thank you from them, even though you don't know my clients, but every time I do a session, they're like, this is amazing. It's like, I know, that's why I learned it. So what is it that you are also doing and offering, so if other people are interested?
Well, first, I just want to thank you for that comment, because that is why I am a teacher. I love to teach, but I also realize that I can only treat so many clients myself. However, if I teach practitioners all over the world, they can treat clients, and I have a bigger influence, I suppose. So I teach a variety of courses. I now teach or spend most of my time teaching a system that I absolutely love because I think it's by far the most effective system I've learned in my gosh 20 years of of searching and learning, and that's the body talk system. And what I love about that system is it's really a protocol that allows practitioners to bring Western and Eastern concepts together. It gives practitioners a variety of tools to work with that whole hierarchy of influence I talked about, whether it's conscious perception, belief systems, emotions, our relationship to our environment, our physical health. And so within that system, I teach the entire core curriculum, and that's everything from a one-day course called Body Talk Access that gives you tools you can use every day in your life to support health. The fundamentals course, which helps clients or students rather to come into the system, perhaps to become practitioners if that's a goal for them. And then that curriculum continues with many important advanced modules, one that looks at consciousness. And what is consciousness? Our capacity to perceive and how we perceive and what that's creating in our life. So such an important class, I think, for students in their own life first, right? How are we influencing our own experience, and then gives them tools, of course, to support their clients in that realm. I teach a class that called biodynamics, which teaches Chinese medicine concepts, including a very, very important theory that we call the Chinese 5 elements, as well as incorporating some important osteopathic components. The whole module is really about restoring movement and movement of emotion. And this is an amazing course. The lymphatic course that you talked about. Classes that look at the environmental influence and how the macrocosm, meaning the external world, is a reflection of the internal world, and how to find that adaptability as we are influenced by the bigger patterns and as we influence the reality we create. And then finally, a very important module that looks at relationship dynamics, whether that's our relationship to our own identity and the things that we think we are and how they influence our stress, how they influence our relationships, how they influence our relationship to our environment, and also relationship dynamics within families, within businesses, within sports teams, and helping to optimize the client's experience of those relationships. So I think it's a really comprehensive curriculum, and one that I find incredibly effective in my own practice. And this is why I devote so much time to teaching this curriculum. I'm a course creator. And so I've created a course that supports practitioners to develop a successful practice by incorporating the nuances of practice beyond whatever modality they utilize. So things like the importance of practitioner and client relationship and how the practitioner's observations of the client impact the outcome. Using tools like communication, intake, evaluation, the environment for healing, how to create a space that supports the practitioner but supports the client's outcome. Really just bringing in the key steps to success, because one of the most important things I see as a teacher is giving my students tools in which they're going to be successful in practice. And so this course is called Beyond Technique, and is one that will soon be available on my website for purchase at any time for any practitioner from any modality or student of healthcare. I have several workshops that I'm just going to launch onto my website next year as well, that are for anybody. Things like breaking up with our belief systems, or helping to teach people to use the skill of visualization of potential, right? Our ability to tune into opportunity and supporting that concept. Teaching clients the creativity, or students the creativity of mind mapping, right? How to observe potential at that level and sort of create a space for it in their life. So lots of different tools like that. Simple introduction to meditation. So those workshops will see online soon on my website, sometime in the new year. There's a lot of projects on my desk at the moment of new curriculum that I'll be launching in the next year and 2 years, really. So it's an exciting time. It's a very exciting time to be in this field. I've been in this field since 2007, as you said, and I've noticed a real shift in awareness and of the importance of being proactive in our health. And
Yeah.
clients, maybe because of our experience of the global pandemic, really stepping up to different ways to approach healing and the investment in their own health.
Yeah.
And so I think the doors have swung wide open to a more integrative, a more cause-based or root cause-based approach to healing, and an empowering approach to healing.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see this developing and growing in the way that it is. And I think we're right at the precipice of a lot of growth in this direction.
Yeah. I see that too. I definitely would underline that. But it's, I think also because the both of us, we focus on practitioner and client relationship. So this is something we bring in. So the clients always come back. The clients also talk about us and say like, okay, there are new clients. And then there are like really what you said, like the doors are open now. Like people are ready for it. They want to experience something else. And this is really a huge potential. So it's great that you teach so many new practitioners as well. So other people come into that field and expertise as well.
Yes, I think that this is a tool that's so useful for practitioners of all modalities. And when I say this, I mean the body talk system and that way of working. I think it gives practitioners a bigger perspective of the things that we've talked about today, and how we can incorporate that regardless of whether working as an osteopath or a naturopath or a chiropractor or whatever field we're coming from. That allows us even to determine which of our tools is going to be supportive of our client today. Because I know, myself included, I have a vast toolbox of things I can bring to the table to help the client. But how do I know which one to use and when? And that's something I really like about the body talk system, because it teaches us a procedural way of working that helps us as practitioners step out of the way a little bit and really create more of a space where the client's body mind, if we use that concept, is directing the show a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it's a more customized approach of supporting them in this moment, as opposed to a one size fits all approach to a disease management. This is about healthcare, not symptom care.
Yeah. And it's for me always so fascinating to see when they come out of like normal medicine. And like you said, like we're not working in a field where something is normal or we just have a symptom. Like the first thing they tell us something and we're not judging, we're just taking it in and say like, okay, we're going to work with that. That is something clients very often don't experience. So that's new for them. And then also that I, at the end of a session, need to ask the energy system of the body, when do you want another session, a follow-up, or anything else? And they're not used to that. It's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't want to see you again in 2 weeks. Like that's way too much. Like we just gonna ask the system. And they're like, this is so cool. They got so used to that and they really like that because they realize they can trust their body more. Like my body knows what it needs. And just because, like you said, we're used to taking pills or anything else, and then you have that descriptions, they're like, okay, for 2 weeks you're taking that pill twice a day, but what is this actually doing? And if you have a system like Body Talk that just really goes for the needs of the client and not just our thought of, oh, this is what the book says, this is what I'm describing right now and prescribing, and the client needs to take it, it's just completely different approach.
Oh, I agree entirely. And I think that it's a really respectful form of healthcare, because it's always putting the client's needs first, which is an underlying piece of the success model that I talk about, is the setting up a dynamic in practice in which the client has a voice, in which the client's relationship in our team is elevated. And I think the body talk system does that very, very well, because inherent in the system is that we're always working with the priority of the client in this moment at this time, including when is an optimal follow-up time. And I should mention that, you know, I talked about the Veltine method of lymphatic drainage because we're really focusing on that today. This is actually a standalone technique. So although we teach it within the Body Talk curriculum, it's actually its own modality, and something that practitioners can offer as an extra modality in practice. It's a wonderful tool, really, for any healthcare practitioner to be able to incorporate in their practice, because it's something that can bring great effect to the client and can be used, as I mentioned, as Dr. John Veltheim used it before working with their typical modalities to optimize outcome. Because again, if we can create purity in the environment for healing, there's a much better chance that they're going to get better results from whatever that modality is that the practitioner practices. So I think that's a really useful gift within this system that is really designed to be used on its own.
And it's really, really nice as well. It's like, it also feels nice if someone else is doing it on you. I can tell that. So that's pretty cool. Do you have anything, any books that you can refer to when someone wants to read up on the lymphatic system? There are a lot of YouTube videos, but is there anything else that you can recommend as well? Because when I started to look into it like 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, wow, the books that I see, not cool at all. Like, what is that? So maybe there is something out now that I don't even know about.
You know, I agree. I think this is an area that hopefully we're going to see a lot more publishing and some really easy to use and easy to read books. I would have to say, as a professional, probably my favorite book is called Silent Waves. And this is more of a textbook written by Dr. Bruno Chikly. He is an osteopath. He has his own system of lymphatic work. But I do like his book a lot because it does give us a great understanding of the anatomy, the physiology, the history of the discovery of the lymphatic system. But it's quite comprehensive. It's quite a more of an academic book. And I have to say, to be honest, I'm really at a loss to come up with great books I would recommend on the lymphatic system at this point. There are many available, and I would say there's a lot of information even now that we can find online. And I often, with my clients, kind of refer them to start there, right? Just start investigating a little bit about the lymphatic system and follow your own curiosity, because when the brain is curious, that's when we learn. And I think that allows them to find the information that they're most interested in to start with. And yeah, maybe that's a time where where we need to consider creating a book for lymphatic drainage for an easy use for our clients. I'll add that to my project list, Dagmar.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, so do you feel like you would like to do that, Tracey? Would definitely be amazing. I would definitely also buy it. So yes, because
I would say that you know, in terms of books, probably my favorite book that I always recommend to clients and to students alike is The Biology of Belief, which is by Dr. Bruce Lipton. And the only reason I bring that up here is it's not specific to lymphatic drainage, but more so a lot of what we've been talking about the influence of the mind. And I think that is just such an important work, because he really brings to our awareness the impact of our beliefs and our emotions and how that impacts our physiology. Yep. And I think that's it's a great read. It's one that I pick up on a regular basis just to reconnect, because I think that it does give us a really nice shift of perspective on our own health. So that is one that I definitely recommend. And if something that clients are not aware of or haven't read, or students haven't read, I definitely advise them that's one to add to your library, because I think it is a groundbreaking work in some ways. And I really appreciate his knowledge and his insight coming from a place of genetics, human genetics, or epigenetics, and the understanding of the impact we have over our own health and wellness. And I find it to be very empowering. So that would be one I'd put on the list for sure.
Yeah, absolutely worth a read. I also recommend that to my clients as well, because you need to read that and think and understand, okay, what am I putting into my own system by just thinking? It's very important.
I agree.
Definitely. Great. That already brings me to my last and final question. What is your gift to the world?
Ah, that's such a good question. What is my gift to the world? I think my gift to the world is my outlook of wanting to share this information so people understand or have a greater perspective of their own potential. I feel like when people ask me, what is it that you do? I feel that ultimately what I do as a practitioner is I help my clients to observe their own potential.
Mhm.
And I feel like that is just such a gift to me, and meaning that I feel so grateful that that's what I get to do um, for a living in my life.
Mhm.
And so I think that perhaps that is my gift to the world, my ability to observe the potential in others and help them to achieve that.
Yeah. Nice and very well said. I really, really like that. So thank you very much for your time and letting us know all of these beautiful details and diving into that topic as well.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Dagmar, and for creating this forum to bring information and ideas to your listening audience. Thank you.
Thank you.